Good evening to everyone joining from India and good morning to our participants from the United States. A warm welcome to today's webinar on obtaining and claiming cybersecurity insurance organized by Indo-American Chamber of Commerce in collaboration with the Cloud Security Alliance Bangalore chapter. Today's session brings together distinguished leaders and industry experts from both nations to share practical real-world insights on the cyber insurance landscape. Our distinguished panel of speakers includes Mr. Scott Laughlin, Partner Hogan Lovells, Mr. Ajay Achyuta, Executive Director and CBO JB Boja Group, Mr. Avya Kapoor, Operations Director Proclaim Insurance Surveyor, Ms. Pooja Agarwal, co-founder CSA Bangalore, Mr. Sandeep Peshkar, Senior Vice President Cybersecurity, Arite. Our moderator for today is Mr. Stephen Matthias, Senior Resident Partner, Kocher and Company, and immediate past Chairman, IACC Karnataka. Before we begin, I would like to request Mr. Gerald Manoharan, Chairman, IACC Karnataka, and partner at J. Sagar Associates, to deliver the opening remarks.
Thank you, Amrita. Good evening, everyone in India, and good morning to all in the US. Great pleasure to be here as part of this whole session. And IACC is really proud to host this webinar. And Indo-American Chamber of Commerce, as you're aware, is a great facilitator and a corridor of engagement between US businesses and Indian businesses. We also work with the state governments of the respective countries to try and bring entrepreneurs, thought leaders, academicians together to try and build new ideas, new technologies, new processes in terms of our working ethics and our cultural ethics. And we are proud to be part of this presentation, which is co-hosted by CSA, that is the Cloud Security Alliance, and JB Boda. I would also like to welcome our distinguished speakers today. And I would also like to welcome especially all our audience who've signed in to listen into this seminar. A lot of thought has gone into this because India recently notified the DPDPA rules, and the whole world is today extremely sensitive about data breach. The whole world thrives on data, the migration of data, the processing of data, and therefore regulators across the world are looking at compliance in terms of data security and data privacy with a very strong view, and to make sure that compliances meet the highest standards. And should there be an event of breach, compensatory resolution and mechanism also being put in place quite effectively. And it is in that context we thought that a presentation which addresses the topic of cybersecurity insurance will be very apt, because very often when we speak to our clients, the kind of fines which are imposed in the event of a cybersecurity breach, whether in India or overseas or in any other country, seems to be humongous. So how do you protect yourself in an unforeseen situation like this? Despite all protections that may be taken, there is obviously a compensatory mechanism that is in place, and we cannot avoid it. Therefore, I hope that this seminar and the discussions that will ensue will be very productive and useful for all of us. Over to you, Amrita.
Thank you so much, Jerry, for setting the tone and the context for today's webinar. Together, our speakers will share all the critical insights on understanding cybersecurity insurance, evaluating the policies, navigating claims, and many more things that we all are looking forward to understand and learn. I would now request our moderator for today, Mr. Stephen Matthias, to take over and continue with the panel discussion. Stephen, over to you.
Thank you, Amrita, and thank you, Jerry, for those opening remarks. I'd like to start by asking Pooja. Pooja is a cybersecurity leader. She's worked within companies. So my question here really is for a CISO, how important is cybersecurity? When you have a company that has perhaps the best of cybersecurity, is there a need for cybersecurity insurance? And what's the perspective that a CISO would have when it comes to obtaining cybersecurity insurance?
Thanks, Stephen. So I kind of played some roles under the CISO organization. and very apt question, right? So I'll kind of take the CISO hat and then wear it and as I answer this question, right? So from a CISO perspective, I think insurance is going to be a part of the balanced risk management strategy, right? So every company should have, you know, some part of the residual risk covered through, this insurance, cyber insurance. Now, a CISO will have to look at residual risk from a perspective of, there will be a 0 day always. There will be a human error always, plus supply chain compromise. Your vendors may get compromised, right? So I think the insurance plays a role to minimize the impact from these scenarios, right? Also, it covers a major financial side of the breach, right? Forensics, legal cost. Whenever there is a breach, there is forensics, legal cost. There is a downtime. There is a recovery procedure. So I think the breach is very costly for any CISO, and a cyber insurance is just to cover that financial side of it. Also, I don't see it as replacing a good security, right? A CISO has to work and make sure there is good security. You may have the best security, but then I think you still need the insurance, right? It's complement to your security, your security stack. Let's talk to the second part of your question, right? Best security, do you still need insurance, right? I see that right now the environment, kind of, we rely on cloud, we rely on SaaS applications, we rely on API vendors, third parties, which means the exposure of a CISO attack surface is beyond his direct control. So he may have the best security within his organization, but I think there are entities who exist where CISO's controls are not directly involved. So I think, for those scenarios, you need cyber insurance, right? You need, there are events you can't predict, a CISO can't predict or fully prevent, and that's where cyber insurance come into play, right? So, answer to your question, yeah, it's needed. It's time we get it. I think both security and cyber insurances are needed for resilience. It's essential to maintain, to cover all your risk.
Okay. So, do most small and medium Indian-sized companies take cybersecurity insurance, or they don't? What's the
Uh,
situation there?
if question to me, Stephen, then my answer will be no, not yet. Large companies and regulatory sectors in India, especially, have adopted a bit of cyber insurance, but mid-sized startups are relatively very, very low. I think this is because companies kind of underestimate their exposures. Also, the premiums of insurance are high, and especially to kind of uh, we struggle with the long process of getting the insurance done. I think there is a struggle with exclusion process, understanding what it takes to get an insurance. I think that awareness level is down. But as the compliance coming in, the regulatory acts are coming in. DPDPA Privacy Act has come in. I think it's more and more stronger push towards getting an insurance done. So I think in future it will be moving upward. That's the trend I see.
Okay. Scott, you're the international expert here. You're a global leader for Hogan Lovells' cybersecurity practice. What's the international perspective here? Because we have Indian companies that are, increasingly doing business internationally, and you know what is the benefit of insurance and what are the risks involved when doing business internationally. Could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, sure, Steven. So I think, if I'm looking at cyber insurance, it is just one component of your overall cybersecurity risk management plan. Pooja did a great job of describing all of the various ways that cybersecurity needs investment. Importantly, that means frontline investment, means all of the implementation of all of the safeguards, all of the perimeter-oriented things that you're doing to try to keep bad guys out. It also means that you're investing kind of internally with your internal stakeholders, your employees, your contractors, those who are going to be on the front lines of making sure that you are implementing those safeguards correctly and addressing issues that come up. But we can all expect that there will be areas where there's going to be some sort of cyber event. There will likely be during the course and life of your business a cyber breach. And so we can expect that. And so the key question then is, can we ensure against those risks? Can we make it so that we're dispersing the potential fines and penalties and liabilities that would come from that over the course of a longer period of time to a larger insurance pool? I think the one area where this becomes a really important issue for organizations operating in and out of India, especially as they partner with US organizations, is in the context of contractual negotiations. You may have all seen that cyber insurance clauses, while not required in any type of law, is common to include in any type of contract, especially where there's an agreement that involves the processing of any type of sensitive information, including personal information. So in other words, a company who is entrusting another company to process data, the company who is providing that data may say, well, hey, you need to maintain cyber insurance to protect that information, or to make sure that there is sufficient assets behind the information that you're doing. So in other words, if you're saying you're going to encrypt all the information, you're going to protect all of that information, you're going to do all of the great things with that information, what happens if you don't? And what happens if the bad guy still gets in and be able to get your data? Is there going to be a sufficient recourse for me to be able to recover the damages that I'm likely to sustain? In other words, what is the risk that the company just doesn't fold and is no longer there to be able to stand behind the promises that they're making in a contract? That's effectively why we have a cyber insurance, and why that's coming in particular with those cyber insurance clauses in your contract, is to make sure that there is the right type of dollars and the right type of financial resources to stand behind those important cybersecurity commitments. Because otherwise, especially from a US company's perspective, it says, well, we could partner with anyone and they can guarantee that my data is going to be safe. But if there's no resources standing behind those commitments, then those commitments really have no teeth. And so I think that from a market practice has certainly developed and will continue to develop over time.
Okay. Is there any kind of thumb rule at all in terms of how much insurance to take from a customer perspective? Because we see one contract will say you need to have $1 million, another will say you need to have $10 million. How do Indian software vendors deal with that?
Yeah, so that is a kind of a case-by-case scenario, and the reason why you're seeing variability there is that there is no real standard. Most US organizations, most global companies have their own risk management processes and their own set standards surrounding what type of cyber insurance policies need to be put into place, and the overall amount of coverage from those cyber insurance policies. What is missing from that analysis, to be frank, is that those cyber insurance policies are not usually done at a claims level. In other words, if one India-based organization has 1,000 clients and there is an impact to their systems, it could well be that 1,000 clients are all going to be impacted by that incident. And if each one of those people, or each one of those companies, have contracts that require $1 million worth of insurance, it's not like there is 1,000 $1 million policies so that we have a large pool to come from. In fact, what it's likely to be is that it's $1 million of coverage divided by 1,000, which is obviously very small. And so you will start to see areas where there is a lot more diligence, perhaps, a lot more questions that are being asked surrounding what is the scope of the coverage, not only from what is it that it insures, but importantly, how much of that $1 million policy that I'm asking for is going to be devoted and allocated toward my claim versus any one of your other claims.
Right. Moving on to Sandeep. So Sandeep, you're a leader at Arite in the cybersecurity area. You're involved with forensic investigations. But I guess the insurance is really meant to cover the risk involved in a cybersecurity incident. But what can a company do to prevent that cybersecurity incident? Because you're doing the forensics, you can see what goes wrong. So you probably know what they can do to prevent that from going wrong.
Sure. Thanks, Stephen. So the most important thing from a cyber incident perspective is preparation is the key for any organization. Earlier, if you see, the thought process was, why will I be breached, or why will my organization be breached? We have the latest tools, we have the latest technologies. But now the thinking that is coming into every organization is, when will I be breached? Because everyone knows that at some point or the other, they are going to get breached. And how well prepared are they? So to prevent themselves, there are a couple of things that an organization needs to really look at. One is from an incident response perspective. How is their overall incident response plan? Is the organization having a very robust incident response plan? Is the team well defined? Is there a well defined incident commander with representatives of all the key departments in that? Are the processes of the organization, in case something happens, is it very well documented? Are backups in place? Are the crown jewels identified, and how are we protecting our crown jewels? And last but not the least is training for employees. The weakest link in the chain generally is the employee, or the accesses related to that. So how well is the training that's being given to employees? So these are some of the key things that an organization needs to look and start working from an incident perspective. In addition to that, there is a complete 360-degree view, a security posture review, which an organization needs to undertake. This 360-degree posture review gives an organization an indication of what is happening in the organization. It could be related to asset management, it could be related to backup management. Generally, if you take a 360-degree posture review, it comprises about 15-16 broad areas like asset management, backup management, cloud management, controls, configuration, data management, incident management, patch, regulatory, like this, totally about 15-16 broad areas. So how well is the organization, you can say, well equipped in all those areas, and what are the big gaps that are coming in? If the organizations can identify those and start taking quick measures to fill up the gaps, especially the category 1 or sub 1 gaps that come in on high priority, that would help an organization at least to be reasonably safe. And last, while you have everything, but unless you do a complete tabletop exercise to understand and get an IR plan implemented on the ground, that will show how well the team knows the plan, how well they are reacting to a plan, and how well they take actions based on the plan. So these three things in combination will help an organization at least prevent an incident happening.
And by IR, you mean incident response, right?
Yes, incident response.
Okay.
That's right.
Are there like simulation exercises that companies can do to, kind of prepare for it?
Yes, Stephen. So the security posture review, which I mentioned, is a simulation exercise. Then the tabletop is also a simulation exercise that they do in order to see the real world preparedness of an organization to handle an incident. In addition to that, there are a lot of other tests and others that the organization can undertake to just see from a overall simulation perspective to see how well are they prepared for an incident.
Okay. So Ajay, I think it's very clear that our members need to take cybersecurity insurance. So you're the insurance expert, many years of experience at JB Boda. So tell us, how does a company go about it? What are the options available in cybersecurity insurance? Is it easily available in India? Are there different types of insurance? Are there different limits? And how does that all work?
Thank you, Stephen, and good evening, good morning to people who have joined this presentation. First of all, thank you very much, IACC, for having us. Stephen, I would like to kind of, build a little context on the cyber insurance. Most of the panelists have spoken about in depth about it, but I thought I will give the insurance angle to it. So we need to kind of look at a little bit of history, as to how the cyber insurance actually evolved. Now, back in the days, typically insurance was for fixed assets or what we call the tangible assets. And when, the information revolution took place, insurance companies actually responded by, moving a little forward and then providing asset insurance, something called the electronic equipment insurance. That was quite in vogue in those days. And this particular insurance had two additional add-on covers, so to say. One was, of course, the external data media, which has got some kind of relevance in the current cyber insurance. And the other was increased cost of working, which again kind of, now is recognized and kind of built into the cyber insurance. Moving forward, what happened with the software boom was, you're aware, like most of the software services are kind of delivered, by way of a contract. And when the software doesn't deliver, the clients could sue the principals for breach of contracts and things of that sort. That was picking up. And then there was this also exposure of, the client storing the principal's data and kind of, encountering breach in their systems. Again, insurance companies actually moved a little forward and kind of issued something called an endorsement, an internet endorsement onto the what you call the technology errors and omissions policies. Uh, but these were all found severely wanting in, the current exposures, which probably a software company or anyone who kind of, uses information technology for the business operations. We even have, the normal commercial general liability policy was also tested for something called the, personal and advertising injury, the media liability, things of that sort. But like I said, there was, lot of policies which would need to kind your exposure. The finally, even something called the commercial crime insurance, which kind of, was basically a plain vanilla, I would say, cash insurance or a fidelity guarantee insurance, but then has evolved to kind of, even cover fraudulent fund transfers. So these were the options which were available to any organizations to cover the cyber risks. But then, ultimately it was found that a new policy is required, and the cyber insurance policy evolved some maybe 15 to 20 years back, primarily again to kind of take care of what we call the third party liability. So that was the intent at that point of time. Software companies were holding, principals data, and there could be a breach and they could be sued for, breach of data. So that was the primary intent. But going forward, again, they found that, the breach itself kind of entails that other associated costs, which we call first party costs, are also incurred. And now you have actually a full blown cyber insurance policy, which takes care both of your first party expenses and your third party liability. So if you look at the scenario currently, yes, cyber insurance policy typically across the spectrum of insurers provide these two covers. One is, of course, your first party, expenses, as you call. So we can imagine a situation where, organization is, coming under a ransomware attack, and then the systems are all down, and then you need somebody, kind of coming in and then finding out what exactly is the problem. I think, Sandeep has his organization comes in as the forensic team, so there are expenses related to the, forensic investigations. So those expenses are, kind of taken care by the first party cover in the policy. Even if there are negotiations to be done, with the ransomware people, that also is a, spend which is taken care in some way in the cyber insurance policy. And of course, like I said, the other part of it is the third party liability, where you could get sued because, the public data is breached and probably getting exfiltrated as well. This will increasingly become more important, particularly with the DPDP rules in act now. So these are the two typical covers available. If you ask me, there may be some variants to the insurance policies available from each of the insurance companies, but largely, the coverage would remain the same. In India, close to 8 to 10 insurance companies offer, the cyber insurance policies. Uh, like Pooja also mentioned it is currently a hard market is what we call in the insurance parlance, because there have been claims, the deductibles are high, and getting is little difficult. But this is slowly kind of getting more easier to be done, particularly if the limits are low. So like if your law office or if any of the officers or even the SMEs need to take a policy, insurers have come out with a 1 or 2 page, what we call an application form, and they can quickly do a review and underwrite such policies. For larger risks, yes, I mean, the process is a little more complex because they need to understand the complete IT infrastructure, maybe the IT security policies. But then again, insurance companies are getting involved now. They have tools at their end where they can kind of remotely gauge the, complete cyber security systems you have at the organization's end, and then they can kind of come out with a report and even, support that for the underwriters. Uh, Lastly, on the limits available currently, I would say, anything like a 10 million USD limit is fairly easily available, but in excess of that, maybe we would require, some kind of reinsurance support. And that can also be kind of, arranged. It's not, we have seen, policies with larger limits as well, with the insurance companies themselves actually going out into the reinsurance market and getting the terms and then providing a structure. You also spoke about, the contractual requirement. Uh, so this is the other part which is little, tricky, because normally if you see a contractual requirement, there are some basic, policies which are compulsory, they would say. One is, of course, the workman's compensation or a commercial general liability. But increasingly, we see the, cyber insurance or commercial crime also making entry into this. And, underwriting purely on the basis of the contract document is little difficult. So that is why this, obtaining a cyber insurance is perceived to be a little cumbersome. But believe me, once if the limits are not very large, the insurance companies today are quite willing to provide you with those limits and with the adequate safe checks. Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned about reinsurance. Does it mean the reinsurer would be from overseas?
So you could have from overseas, or so India typically has, I would say, technically only one reinsurer, which is the GIC Re, so to say. There are officers of other reinsurers, operating in India, but for cyber and all, you necessarily need to reach out to London, where the Lloyd's market is there. And so there are capacities, we call, the limits in terms of capacities being available. So there are capacities available in the London market, and if there is a larger organization, and if you're looking at, let's say, 50 million or in excess of 50 million, then is, something like a tower structure is also kind of built up for policies. So that's quite possible.
Okay. So Avya, I'm finally coming to you. You're the operations director at Proclaim, which is a loss adjuster. And tell us first, what is a loss adjuster? But my question here is, if you're involved in understanding what are the losses when a cyber security incident actually happens, then perhaps you can advise a company at the time of taking insurance in understanding what could be the losses, and then that might help them decide on their coverage. How does one actually do this? How do you assess what is the loss in the cybersecurity world?
Thank you very much, Stephen. So, primarily, what's a loss adjuster? That's the first one, so I'll do that first. A loss adjuster is a certain entity that comes into the picture to assess what coverages are provided by the insurance policy, and then identify the exposure and document the exposure for the insurance company to pay the indemnity or pay out the amount that is capable of being paid under the policy. So that's my job. I am a third party. I'm an independent third party. I do not act for insurers. I do not act for insureds, but I am appointed by either to be able to provide a perspective, a fair, reasonable, and independent perspective. So that's that's what I do. In terms of your second question on what is covered or what whether we can identify what the insured needs prior to the event itself or the breach itself. In fact, we can. The organization that I work with, we do a lot of work in this field where we identify the exposures of our clients and document what are the coverages that they would require in the event of a cyber breach. And as Ajay already alluded to, the standard cyber policy basically has two positions, one being the first party loss, the second being the business interruption or the damages loss. The first party loss obviously covers you for your forensic costs, your data restoration costs, your PR costs, that's reputational damages cost, along with legal cost or costs associated with data subject notification. All of these are first party costs that the policy covers. It also covers you for your network interruption. That means in the event of a breach, if your business is stalled or there is no capability of running the business, then the losses incurred are also capable of being indemnified under the policy. So, as an organization, we try to analyze what are your exposures. So, if you're a manufacturing unit, for instance, and you do not deal with direct customers, you only deal with businesses, then we try and quantify what your exposure would be in terms of stoppage and in terms of reinstatement of business activities, what your exposure would be. Similarly, if you're a business that operates in the B2C segment, then your exposure could be a little higher because you would be exposed to customer claimed damages. You could also be exposed to fines and penalties from the regulator because of privacy breaches. And as again, the panelists have alluded to, with the TPDP coming into play, I think cyber insurance becomes rather critical for most businesses, whether it's a small business in India or a business overseas, whether it's a large business, it becomes very critical because you're now in an environment where you will be breached. When is the question, not whether you will be or not. When is the question? And at the end of the day, are you going to be exposed to only a regulator in India, or are you going to be exposed to various regulators in various jurisdictions? That's the question that you need to ask. We've recently had a situation where the entity is within India, but they're operating various offices and branches in Europe. And they've now been exposed to the GDPR, and a breach has led them to have an enormous exposure whilst their limits are in the vicinity of $2 million. And unfortunately, while the policy is triggering, is willing to pay, it can only pay to the limit, whereas the exposure might be in the vicinity of $10 million or $12 million. So these are things that clients in India and overseas now need to look at and need to be aware of whilst they're assessing the cyber posture, in my opinion.
Okay. Is it a best practice to involve the loss adjuster at the time you're taking the insurance itself? And in India, do you see that as a market practice?
Well, I'd say not everybody does that in India. It's not a market practice, but the bigger, more sustained businesses and the more critical business houses, they do that very often. They do engage somebody like us or an RATA to be able to ascertain their cyber posture first, and then us to be able to ascertain what coverages should be taken and whether those coverages, cover all their exposures or not. And then somebody like an Ajay would come into the picture to be able to ensure that the policy that we recommend or the wording that we recommend is then capable of being placed in the market, and an insurer is able to say, yes, I will cover you for all of these exposures.
Okay. Pooja, once CISO told me that taking cyber insurance is a nightmare. Why is that? Can you explain? Why do companies find it so hard?
As a personal experience, also, I think it's a big nightmare, um, because the process is extremely demanding, and I think the insurance are not just asking basic questions, right? They are doing they are doing deep technical assessments. While doing such assessments, a CISO has to prove that they have controls which you know which is working for them, right? So you have to prove working controls in a very complex environment. Some controls are advanced controls also, right? So it's not just your password hygiene. They are checking if you have MFA in every step of your logins. They are they are checking strong identity and access management hygiene. Is your access controlled? They are checking if you have a good patching discipline. And by the way, it's a lot of struggle to patch for vulnerabilities in a OT environment, right? We are forgetting about legacy machines which are there. The insurance are asking about backups, recovery. Have you tested your backups? The insurance are asking about, are you kind of monitoring your threats properly? Forget threats. Are you monitoring your identities properly, right? Your privilege access control. So that's a lot, right? It's have you done tabletops? What's the proof of your tabletop to work? That's a lot. And remember, it's always also, it's also a budget issue, right? The CISOs are struggling to make sure they get the right budget to implement these controls, right? So it's also a budget issue which the CISO struggle. If even if there is one control missing, right? The premiums go dramatically go very high, or maybe you may be denied an policy, right? That's why I think it's quite stressful. And with the modern uptake on technology, with AI coming in, the expectations are rising, right? I've personally seen some of these forms. I wish Jay kind of said that it's a smaller form, 2 page, but the 2 pages is not something I've seen. I've seen 200 to 400 questions. Vendor risk, your SOC process, your backup, and it's not a yes or no answer, right? It's very specific. They want proof. They want diagrams. They want your policies. Yeah, so it's a, I think it's difficult than clearing your audit. It's sometimes audit are more structured, whereas insurance, I think that the process to get it is a little bit not as structured as audit also, so it's difficult. Plus, internally, if I look from an organization perspective, CISO has to kind of work through legal, has to work through the IT risk people, have to work through the other stakeholders, the senior LT of the company. The CISO has to work through IT infrastructure asset. So I think getting an insurance itself is a big tabletop exercise for the CISO to achieve, and then find out what included, what's excluded. So it's a lot of effort which CISO has to put, but with no guarantee that the insurance claim will go through, right? So that,
I
yeah.
can see Ajay smiling there. You're the insurance expert, and I guess you can certainly handhold companies through this process. But I wanted to move on to the role of the forensic expert here. In India, it seems to be done very differently, where the forensic expert seems to be appointed by the insurance company, maybe mentioned in the policy itself. How does that work?
That's for me, Stephen.
Yeah, for you, Ajay.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I would be happy to kind of assist Pooja. I don't want to do my sales pitch here, but yeah. To answer to your question, we actually kind of alluded to that. Now, this is again a little bit of history or the insurance regulations, so to say. IRD regulations clearly mentioned that the assessment or the assessment of a loss, any loss for that matter, be it cyber or anything, needs to be necessarily done by a third party who is neither an insurer or nor an insurer. So probably that is the aspect which has been borrowed from the concept of insurance policies, and you have what you call the named, I mean, so normally property insurers would have a named surveyor clause. So you could ideally have a nominated loss adjuster named into the policy. And the cyber insurance is, of course, a little different. Uh, we have, insurance policy naming the forensic, agency in the policy itself. For a couple of reasons. Of course, this is one of the first reasons which I would presume is to have a independent assessment. And the second is most of the time, large organizations will have their own incidents response team. But let us say a hotel or, like law offices like yours or something, you will really not know what is to be done the moment incident happens. And, so the forensics team is available to you 24/7. 365 days. So that's your first port of call, and you could reach out to them. The third thing also is, people like Sandeep and all actually deal with these kind of incidents day in and day out. So it's quite possible that they would have just finished an assignment with a particular ransomware attack and the negotiations, and then they jump onto the next one. So this gives them much visibility onto how to kind of handle such situations. So these are the reasons probably the forensic team is already kind of a named agency within the policy. Uh, some policies do not have that, and then there are discussions as to who should be engaged, and then so you would kind of lose time on that, what we call the golden hour. I mean, certain says that you need to report it within 6 hours, and not for the reason that reporting is compulsory, but that is the time when most of the activity would be happening around. And I understand that the forensic team could also quickly come into position and probably mitigate some of the losses which could ensue following not properly attempting those mitigation measures. So yes, these are some of the reasons which the forensic team is kind of named in the policy and brought into the picture immediately on the occurrence of an incident.
Okay. Scott, I understand there's a somewhat of a divergence in market practice in India compared to the US and perhaps most developed countries. There's a concept of legal privilege where if the law firm representing the company appoints the forensic expert, then that's covered by legal privilege. But it's not, I mean, it's not practiced that way in India. What do you see, what exactly is this concept in the US, and what are the benefits of that? And also, what are the risks for Indian companies in not following that approach?
Yeah, sure, Stephen. So it's a really good and important point because, I think as Avia is mentioning, the scope of potential liability here, especially outside of India, I think is growing. So it's often the case where you have an organization who's operating globally. They may be processing data subject to the GDPR. They may be processing data that's subject to US laws. They may be subject to a variety of different laws. And the liabilities that are associated with that data are different than what the liabilities are that are in India. And so a real concern in this particular space, especially here in the United States, is that there are a growing number, and actually a significant number already, of law firms who sue companies who have had data breaches. And that's not regulators going after them for fines and penalties. That is also happening. But importantly, these are law firms that are bringing litigation for companies alleging that their cybersecurity practices were negligent. They had a data breach, thus they didn't have the appropriate safeguards. That was negligent. You owe lots of money. And that number can be a significant amount. If you look at some of the largest settlements, like for Equifax, for example, it was north of $700 million for settlements of just those litigation claims. So if you can imagine like how you're handling those types of disputes and that type of litigation, well, plaintiffs' lawyers are going to look for evidence of indications of negligence. And they're going to want to understand, well, why did you have this incident? What safeguard did you not have? What safeguard was not implemented effectively? How is it that the bad guys happened? And if you create a forensics report, which you have to do to be able to conduct an investigation, and that forensics report outlines exactly what is it that happened, Well, you can imagine plaintiff's lawyers will love that document because they'll take it and they'll say, this is Exhibit A in my lawsuit against the company for failure to have appropriate cybersecurity. You hired an expert, your own expert said that you didn't have this particular control, this particular safeguard operating effectively. Thus, you are liable. I don't have to say anything more. That's kind of where we find ourselves. So in order to make sure that we are addressing that appropriately, one strategy is to engage those forensics firms, not for purposes of conducting an investigation for the company or for the insurer or for any other third party, but for purposes of informing legal's advice, so that we would then exert attorney-client privilege to the results of that report. And then we can take the results and make sure that they are not in a position where they are then going to be disclosed to the plaintiff's law firms to then be weaponized against the company who had the cybersecurity breach. And that is a difference perhaps in market practice, but is also an area where, frankly, every global firm, those who are especially those in India who are operating and have connections outside of India in the United States, have to be conscious of, even if they do not have the same type of privileges in India.
Okay. And I take it the cyber security authorities in most countries do have a right to simply demand the forensic report.
Some do, and it would be an area that we carefully figure out how we can manage the disclosure of it. So one of the things about attorney-client privilege is that you have to make sure the information is confidential, so that my disclosure of that information to an outside party, and regardless of potentially who that outside party is, may end up hurting my claim that that was a subject to attorney-client privilege. So we are often in a position where we're working with our external stakeholders, whether those be insurers, whether those be external government authorities, regulators, to be able to provide responsive information so that they can do their good work while at the same time trying to protect the underlying documents that we created to support the legal analysis that follows a cybersecurity event.
Okay. So Sandeep, you're the forensics guy, and can you take us through what is the role of the forensic expert? What does the forensic expert do, and how helpful is the forensic expert in a situation where a cybersecurity incident actually happens?
Sure, Stephen. So what we are seeing is nowadays most of the organizations have an IR partner, incident response partner, who comes in initially even before an attack has happened on a, you can say, like a retainer basis, does a assessment of the security posture of the organization, does various simulation exercise, does security end-to-end a 360-degree view of the security of the organization, so that the IR partner gets a view of what is the organization doing, what are the, you can say, areas of improvement where the organization should really focus on, give those suggestions to the organization. Now, in case an incident happens, since this IR organization knows in depth about the organization, knows about their crown jewels, knows about their network security, knows about their logs. So there are a couple of activities that the organization initially does. The first step is to contain the threat. So now that the attack has happened, the focus is on trying to stop the spread of the attack, or try to limit the damage that's happening through various mechanisms that are there. It could be isolating all the impacted systems, compromising systems, trying to identify the attacker activity that is happening, try to isolate that, and try to prevent further loss. So this will be the first immediate action that will happen in the golden hour that we call as. Now, once the attack has been minimized, then a couple of tracks start opening up. One is the investigation track, where the forensics team tries to look at the logs. What has really happened? How did the threat actor get into the system? What was the area of compromise? What were the IOCs that have happened? It could be the firewall logs, it could be the VPN logs, it could be the Active Directory related stuff. So they try to look into all the sources by which a threat actor could have got into the system and compromised the whole organization. After that comes the root cause analysis, trying to create the entire timeline reconstruction. When did the threat actor come in? What did he do? How much time was he sitting? We have seen in a couple of cases, Stephen, that the threat actor is sitting in the system and observing the customer for 8 to 9 months, just observing what the customer is doing. And then at an appropriate time, just before you can say a long weekend or some holidays, they start attacking and try to inflict as much damage as possible. So in the analysis phase, we try to do a complete RCA of what was the compromise, what was the lateral movement that happened, what was the data that got exfiltrated, what was the encryption that was done, what was the impact of the whole attack that had happened, what was the malware that came in, how did the malware get in, and all the parts of that, the analysis and the investigation. Last is the fixing part of it, which is the creation of reports that are required for the customer or for various regulatory authorities. And then what are the steps that an organization should do to prevent further attacks happening? And if there is any action to be taken from a tool perspective or a person perspective, all those actions that come in the report. This is one track that happens. Now, the second track that happens in parallel after the spread has been contained is the restoration track. We try to look into where is the data, where is the backup available? Can we quickly clean up the various systems that are there and try to bring the customer back on track quickly? So that is a second track that generally goes on. And third is, in the worst case, if there's a threat actor communication to be done, negotiation to be done, that runs as a third track where we talk to the threat actor, understand what data has he exfiltrated, look for proof of life. Then post negotiation, try to get the decryption key from the threat actor and try to bring the customer back into business. So these are some of the activities this the forensics team does in case of an attack that happens.
And if you need the cooperation of the threat actor, then who does that negotiation? Who's best placed in the company or among experts to do that negotiation?
So what happens, Stephen, is given that we have worked with so many threat actors, we have worked on almost 13,000 cases so far. Arita has worked on 13,000 cases so far. So we know what a threat actor does, what is his approach, how does he negotiate, how much ransom does he ask for, is he reliable, does he go for double extortion, multiple extortion and all. So given that knowledge, we provide this information to the CISO or the customer team who is negotiating with the threat actor so that they are well prepared. So if the threat actor comes back with certain demands or certain feedback, the CISO or the customer is well prepared to answer and get back quickly the information that's required.
Okay. Avya, we've finally reached kind of the end stage, which is, okay, you've suffered a cybersecurity incident, you've got your forensic expert in, you've contained the damage, but there is a loss. So now you have to claim that, make a claim on the insurance company. How do you go about assessing the loss, and particularly understand there's some kind of a net profit method of doing this? So could you explain that and perhaps give us an example?
Sure. So, Stephen, I'll just take a bit from what Scott just said. So, just to elaborate on his point with the US jurisdiction versus the Indian jurisdiction. So, in India, we also have client attorney privilege positions that are adopted. But within the insurance parlance, what we are doing is the forensics are appointed by an entity such as ourselves so that the insured has limited access to the forensic report in order to ensure that it is not weaponized against the insured. And what Scott said, it's something that's happening very regularly in India, that there is no breach that has been encountered, but you suddenly get a notice from a law firm in the US saying that there is a privacy breach that has been evidenced through your website or through your processes, and we are now intending to proceed against you. So this is something that is very real, very apparent, and is happening within India as well. So Scott, to that, I think you've picked up a really vital point there. Now, on the issue, Stephen, that you just raised and how we deal with this situation. So in the event of a cyber breach, we are appointed at 0 hour we are asked to partner with the insured and the forensics team. And usually we would appoint the forensics team. We would obviously take guidance from the insured. We would take their consent and appoint the forensic team that we believe is the best suited for the activity with the consent of the insured. Once we've done that, we would pay for the forensics agency so that the insured does not need to shell that money out of their pocket, and the forensic report becomes our property rather than their property. All of this is done to protect the insured. So the costs associated with forensics, the costs associated with data reconstruction, making a gold image from the backup, restoring data, all of those costs are part of the forensic costs, and the policy would pay for them. So we pick them up on day one, and the insured does not lose any money. The part where the insured has a particular loss is primarily, in my opinion, the business interruption or the network interruption loss, which is when the insured cannot operate for a substantial period of time. It may be a few days, it may be a few weeks. We've done a few claims in the manufacturing sector, in the fintech sector, in the new entities sector or the entrepreneurial sector, and all of them have a different methodology adopted to be able to understand or to analyze what their actual loss is. And the policy primarily pays the net profit loss. So if you are able to prove that there would have been a net profit that you earned during the interruption period, then that would be paid by the policy under the indemnity clauses that are available. So for instance, if you're a business that does, let's say for this example's sake, a $10 million revenue, of which you have a 20% profit margin or net profit margin. So that means you have $200,000 worth of net profit, and you are interrupted for, let us say, 10 days. So you've got a situation where you've got $2 million worth of net profit that the policy can indemnify. Obviously, this is subject to other clauses, which is, do you actually have net profit? Was the interruption of 10 days actually 10 days, or should it be 8 instead of 10? Did you act prudently to be able to mitigate everything? All of those obviously set aside. But if in a vanilla sort of a sentence, you've got 10 days of interruption, $200,000 worth of net profit a day, that's your loss. Less waiting period, that's what you get indemnified. And this could vary significantly if it's a fintech or if it's if it's a manufacturing sector company or if it's a pharmaceutical company, it could vary.
What about loss of reputation? Would that be covered?
Primarily, the loss that is caused because of reputation is not covered, but the costs incurred to rebuild reputation, which we under the policy call PR costs, those are covered. So any costs incurred to hire a PR firm, get your reputation back in the fashion that it was, social media campaigns, marketing campaigns, anything and everything under that umbrella would stand covered to be able to get yourselves back to a place where your reputation damages are not incurred anymore. But the reputation damage that you have incurred in those 10, 12, 20 days, no, that can't be. That's not this policy. There's another policy for that, but this policy will not be able to, give you indemnity for that.
Okay. And just one last question here. What do you see as the level of success among companies when they're claiming cybersecurity insurance? Is it a big minefield, or is it fairly clear?
It's a very good question, Stephen, because historically, an insurance policy obtaining or invoking the policy and obtaining a claim out of a policy has been a difficult task because there are many clauses in a policy. Funnily, cyber, in my opinion and in my experience, has been one of the best policies in terms of obtaining a claim under the policy because it's what we call a discovery-based policy. So as Sandeep alluded to, you could have a threat actor that's been in your system for 12 months, 14 months. And I've seen one where they've been in the system for 24 months, moving laterally through the system. There was no capability of identifying the threat actor within the system because they would cover their tracks, they would erase logs, they would do whatever they needed to. And when it was discovered, they had all the information, they had exfiltrated all the information, they had encrypted a vast domain of information. So the policy says we will provide you indemnity based on discovery, not based on act, but based on discovery. So if you discover it today and you have a policy that's active today, you get covered. And in my experience, I've seen very few claims being denied. There might be issues with respect to what's payable under the claim, that means the quantum, but trigger is largely, in my opinion, 95%, 96%. Trigger is obviously acceptable and coverage is advanced.
That's great news for a CFO who's wondering, why should I pay this premium? Will I get losses back at the end, or will it be denied to be on some ground or the other? So I think that's great to hear. We've reached the end of the hour, so I'll move to a closing, and I'm going to just ask each one of you to spend just a minute and just give me your key kind of takeaway, the one takeaway that you would give. So we'll start with Pooja.
Yeah, I think for me, cyber insurance is going to be uptick going forward. We just need to look at how to make it easier, how to be making it inclusive, more inclusive. And from a CISO perspective, it's complementary to their security.
Okay. Ajay?
Yeah, so since I'm an insurance salesman, I would say this, if you are not purchased the cyber insurance policy, please go ahead and do it. Particularly in the background of the DPDP rules being already out there. Now, what is going to happen is, India hitherto didn't have a breach notification rule that's out in the open. So the board and the data principles, as we say, are to be reported about the data breach. The second is the fines and penalties. Again, the fines, I understand, go to the Consolidated Fund of India. But what is going to happen is once a entity is going to be fined, it's literally going to open up a Pandora's box. There are going to be litigations. So the compensation element has to come from the cyber insurance policy. Uh, I would say that, from the earlier times, the application forms have been simplified, and it's quite possible to obtain cyber insurance policy. Maybe, not to the limits or with a larger deductible, but the first point would be to actually purchase a policy, have the policy in place, and maybe, because typically the insurance industry works on something called the past year's experience. So maybe in a 2 years or 3 years time, you would get the policy you want at the price you would, you're prepared to pay. So that's it. Yeah.
Okay. Sandeep?
Yes, Stephen. I think the main message that I have is every organization should know that they will get breached. It's not the question of will I get breached, but when will I get breached? So the main thing that an organization should be ready is preparation is the key. Being ready to face an cyber attack is the key to staying safe.
Okay. Abhya, on to you.
I think everybody's covered the key takeaways, but what I'll say is that I think resilience within this ecosystem is all about preparation and having the right ecosystem alongside yourselves. And with ecosystem, I mean the right insurance partner, the right insurance broker, the right forensics intermediary, the right adjuster. If the ecosystem is available to yourselves, and that ecosystem should be available pre a loss, not post a loss. If that is available to yourselves, the ecosystem knows how to operate within a stress scenario. I think that is what allows you to respond in a resilient manner and make sure that you get out of a situation faster, efficiently, and with least damages to yourselves.
Thank you. Scott, the last word for you.
Sure. I mean, I think I agree with everything that my co-panelists have said. Maybe I would add is that I think many folks think of cyber insurance and say that once they have it, then, hey, we're all good here. It's not the case. Cyber insurance is a component of your overall risk management program. It is not the solution to your risk management program. And importantly, the details, like everything else in cybersecurity, matter a lot. And that means that a cyber insurance policy needs to make sure that you're evaluating and understanding what it covers, importantly, what it doesn't cover, what is it that you want from it. So for example, you may have your preferred cyber insurance assessor, your cyber insurance forensics partner. You want to make sure that those are covered by those policies and not eliminated part of the panel list. Same is true for your outside counsel. All of the things that your partners that you are going to want to be in the middle of that crisis with, you want to make sure that those are all covered by your cyber insurance policy, and that those policies are set up in a way to cover the losses and the damages that you will incur.
Thank you, everyone. I have to say that I've learned a lot myself. What we've tried to do here is to start from the beginning in terms of cybersecurity, the need for insurance, how you go about getting insurance, the role of the forensic expert, the role of the loss adjuster, and also providing an international experience. I hope our members have enjoyed this. Thank you to the panelists. You have been fantastic, really deep knowledge and experience coming out here. And I've certainly enjoyed this, moderating this discussion. We will, of course, send the recording of this to all our members and urge them to take a look at cybersecurity insurance as a key component of their cybersecurity strategy. So thank you, everyone, and we will now conclude.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.